The great hall stretched higher than any building Hana had ever seen on Earth. Crystal walls reached up into darkness, glowing with soft light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Thousands of alien beings filled the enormous space, their strange forms creating shadows that danced across the floor. Hana Kim stood in the center of it all, feeling very small and very alone. She was only 13 years old, wearing her school uniform because it was the nicest clothes she owned. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her hands shook slightly as she looked up at the creatures surrounding her. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others floated in the air without any visible means of support. A few were so large that she could only see parts of their bodies through the crowd. This was the Galactic Council, the most powerful organization in the known universe. And somehow she was here to represent all of humanity. Ambassador Crix leaned forward on his many tentacles, his 3 yellow eyes fixed on the small human girl. He was from the Valtari Empire, one of the oldest and most influential species in the Council. His skin was a deep purple color, covered in patterns that shifted and changed as he moved. "So this is what humanity sends us," Crix said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite the strange clicking sounds his mouth made. "A child," murmurs spread through the assembled aliens. The universal translators built into the walls turned their various languages into words Hana could understand, but the tone was clear in any language. They were not impressed. Councillor Thane rose from his seat near the front of the hall. He was massive, even by alien standards, with scales that gleamed like polished metal and eyes that burned like small suns. His species had conquered half the Andromeda galaxy through pure military might. "The humans claim their species has special qualities," Thane rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "They say they can contribute something valuable to our alliance. Yet they send us this small creature who has barely lived long enough to learn to speak properly." More murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hana could feel thousands of alien eyes studying her, measuring her and finding her lacking. She had known this would be difficult, but standing here surrounded by beings who could destroy her planet without effort made the reality much harder than she had imagined. High Arbitrator Vel materialized near the center of the chamber. She was not quite solid, her energy form flickering between dimensions like a candle flame in the wind. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The humans request membership in the Galactic Council," Vel announced, though everyone present already knew why they were here. "They claim to possess qualities that would benefit our alliance. However, their representative appears to be quite young by the standards of most species." Hana finally found her voice. "I may be young, but I speak for all of humanity," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My people chose me because they believed I could show you who we really are." Crix's tentacles writhed with what might have been amusement. "And who are you really, little human? What makes your species think they deserve to stand among the stars with beings who have mastered forces beyond your comprehension?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Hana had prepared for this moment during the long journey from Earth, but now that it was here, all her practiced speeches seemed inadequate. How could she explain humanity to creatures who had never known what it meant to be weak or small or afraid? "We are good at making friends," she said finally, the words coming out simpler than she had intended. The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, laughter began to spread through the chamber. It was not kind laughter. The aliens found her answer amusing in the way adults might find a child's drawing of a spaceship cute but meaningless. Crix was the first to speak through his laughter. "Friends? You offer friendship as your contribution to galactic civilization? Child, we are speaking of interstellar trade networks, military alliances, technological exchanges that span entire star systems. What use is friendship among such matters?" "A great deal of use, actually," Hana replied, her fear beginning to transform into something else. These beings were powerful beyond imagination, but they had just revealed something important about themselves. They had forgotten what friendship actually meant. Councillor Thane's massive head tilted slightly. "Explain yourself, human child." Hana took a deep breath, thinking of her little brother Dae-Hyun back on Earth, of her parents who had hugged her goodbye without knowing if they would ever see her again, of the billions of humans who were counting on her to somehow make this work. "When humans make friends, it is not just about what we can get from each other," she began. "It is about choosing to care about someone else even when it does not benefit us. It is about helping people who cannot help us back." It is about standing together when things get difficult. She looked around the vast chamber, meeting as many alien gazes as she could. You have built an amazing civilization, but how many of you actually trust each other? How many would help another species if there was nothing in it for them? The laughter had stopped. The chamber was quiet except for the soft humming of the life support systems that kept so many different species alive in the same space. High Arbitrator, Fel's energy form pulsed brighter as she considered the girl's words. You suggest that trust is more valuable than strength or knowledge? I suggest that without trust, strength and knowledge do not matter very much, Hana answered. The strongest person in the world is still weak if they have to face everything alone. The smartest person in the universe cannot solve problems they do not understand because no one will talk to them honestly. Crix's tentacles stopped moving as he processed this perspective. And humans are trustworthy? We try to be. We do not always succeed, but we keep trying. Hana's voice grew stronger as she spoke about her people. When humans meet someone new, our first instinct is usually to offer help, not to figure out how to defeat them or use them. That sounds remarkably foolish, observed a crystal-like being whose name Hana had not learned. Maybe it is, she agreed with a small smile, but it has worked out pretty well for us so far. Every major advancement in human history happened because people chose to work together instead of fighting each other. Counselor Thane leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the girl. Yet humans have wars. Your species fights constantly over resources, territory, beliefs. How can you claim to be naturally cooperative? Because even when we fight, we remember how to stop fighting, Hana replied. Human soldiers in wars have been known to declare truces on holidays to share food with their enemies. When natural disasters strike, people risk their lives to save strangers. When someone falls down in public, other humans help them up without thinking about whether they will get anything in return. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. We are not perfect. We make mistakes, we argue, we sometimes hurt each other. But underneath all of that, most humans genuinely want to help each other succeed. We want to build things together rather than tear them down. The chamber remained silent as the assembled aliens considered her words. Many of them came from species where cooperation was limited to members of their own kind, or where alliances were purely transactional arrangements based on mutual benefit. Ambassador Crix's eyes narrowed as he studied the human girl with new interest. You speak of cooperation and friendship as if they were strengths rather than weaknesses. Most species view such sentiments as obstacles to true achievement. Then maybe that is why so many galactic civilizations rise and fall, Hana suggested quietly. Power without friendship becomes tyranny. Knowledge without trust becomes manipulation. Strength without cooperation becomes destruction. High Arbitrator Vel's form flickered more rapidly as she processed the implications of the girl's philosophy. You are proposing that emotional connections between species could be more valuable than traditional measures of advancement. I am saying that the greatest achievements in the galaxy probably required both, Hana answered. But when you have to choose between being strong and being trusted, being smart and being kind, being advanced and being helpful, humans usually choose the second option. Counselor Thane's laugh was like the rumble of an earthquake. And you believe this makes your species valuable to the Council? I believe it makes us different from everyone else you have ever met, Hana said simply. And sometimes being different is exactly what a group needs to solve problems they could not solve before. The massive reptilian counselor considered this for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of genuine curiosity rather than dismissal. Very well, small human. You have spoken eloquently of your species' supposed virtues. But words are easy to speak and difficult to prove. If humanity truly possesses these qualities you describe, perhaps it is time to test them. Hana felt her heart skip a beat. What kind of test? Crix's mandibles clicked together in an expression that might have been a smile. There is an ancient trial, older than most of the civilizations represented in this chamber. It has not been used for centuries because few species have been foolish enough to claim virtues they could not demonstrate. What does this trial involve? Hana asked, though she was beginning to suspect she wabiao. The transport ship was unlike anything Hana had ever seen. Its walls curved in impossible ways, made from a material that seemed to shift between metal and crystal depending on how the light hit it. The journey to Nexus Prime would take 3 days, and she would spend them completely alone. Hana sat on the narrow bed in her assigned quarters, looking out through the transparent wall at the stars rushing past. They moved so fast that they became streaks of light rather than individual points, creating patterns that hurt her eyes if she stared too long. Somewhere among those distant lights was Earth, where her family probably thought she was attending a special science camp. The cover story had been necessary to prevent panic. If people knew that a 13-year-old girl was deciding the fate of humanity in a trial that had killed countless beings more powerful than any human, there would have been riots in the streets. Instead, her parents had packed her favorite snacks and reminded her to brush her teeth every night. She missed them terribly. A soft chime indicated that Caretaker 7 was approaching. The robot was her only companion on this journey, programmed to provide basic information about the trial while being careful not to offer any actual help. It rolled into her quarters on silent wheels, its optical sensors glowing a soft blue. "Good morning, Hana Kim," the robot said in its flat mechanical voice. "I trust you slept adequately despite the circumstances." "As well as can be expected," Hana replied, turning away from the window. "Can you tell me more about this dragon I'm supposed to face?" Caretaker 7's sensors focused on her with mechanical precision. Bik is approximately 1,500 years old, which makes her quite young by cosmic dragon standards. She measures 200 meters from nose to tail, with wings that span over 300 meters when fully extended. Hana tried to imagine something that large and failed completely. The biggest thing she had ever seen was a blue whale at the aquarium, and this dragon was apparently 10 times bigger than that. "What do cosmic dragons eat?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Cosmic dragons do not require physical sustenance in the traditional sense," the robot explained. "They feed on energy patterns, emotional resonance, and in some cases, the life force of other beings. Beck specifically has been known to consume the hopes and dreams of those who fail her trials. That was somehow worse than if the dragon had just wanted to eat her body." Hana could imagine few things more horrible than having her hopes and dreams devoured, leaving her alive but empty of everything that made life worth living. "Has anyone ever survived meeting her?" Hana asked. "Survival rates are approximately 0% over the past 800 years, Caretaker 7 replied with characteristic robot honesty. However, it should be noted that survival and success are not necessarily the same thing in the context of Bayek's trials. "What do you mean?" The robot's optical sensors dimmed slightly as it accessed deeper files. Historical records indicate that the dragon's judgment is not based solely on physical survival. Previous candidates have been evaluated on qualities that are difficult to quantify. Courage, wisdom, moral character, and what ancient texts refer to as worthiness of spirit. And none of them measured up? Correct. Every species that has faced Bayek has been found lacking in some fundamental way. The Korthani sent their greatest warrior philosopher, who lasted 47 minutes before succumbing to what records describe as existential despair. The Zephyrians sent a collective consciousness representing their entire civilization, which dissolved into component parts within 32 minutes. Hana absorbed this information while watching the stars streak past her window. Every species that had attempted this trial had been more advanced than humans, more powerful, more experienced with galactic civilization. If they had all failed, what chance did she possibly have? "Caretaker 7, can you tell me about the dragon's breath weapon?" Affirmative. Unlike mythological dragons from human folklore, Beck does not breathe fire or destructive energy. Instead, she exhales what researchers have termed concentrated despair. Beings exposed to this attack lose all hope, all motivation to continue existing. They typically collapse and expire from complete psychological shutdown. So she kills people by making them too sad to live? That is a simplified but essentially accurate description, the robot confirmed. Hana thought about this for a long time. Most weapons tried to destroy the body, but this dragon attacked something much deeper. She tried to imagine feeling so hopeless that death seemed preferable to continuing, and the idea made her shiver. "Why does the Galactic Council allow this trial to continue if it always ends in death?" she asked. Caretaker 7 was quiet for several seconds, which was unusual for a robot programmed to answer questions quickly. "That information is classified above my access level," it finally replied. "However, I am permitted to share that the trial serves important functions in maintaining galactic stability." There was something in the robot's tone that suggested there was much more to this story than she was being told. The council was allowing species to face certain death for reasons they would not explain. That seemed suspicious, but Hana had no way to investigate further. The second day of travel passed slowly. Hana spent most of it trying to prepare mentally for what awaited her. But how could anyone prepare to face a creature that could kill with concentrated sadness? She found herself thinking about Earth, about all the small things that made life good. Her mother's cooking, her father's terrible jokes, the way her little brother Daehyun always fell asleep reading books under his covers. These memories felt important somehow, like armor against the despair the dragon would try to use against her. If Beck fed on hopes and dreams, maybe the key was to have hopes and dreams worth protecting. On the third day, they arrived at Nexus Prime. The planet appeared on the view screen as a dark sphere wrapped in perpetual storms. Lightning flickered between the clouds constantly, some bolts large enough to be seen from space. The world looked angry, as if it resented having visitors. The planet's surface is largely uninhabitable, Caretaker 7 explained as they descended through the storm layer. Atmospheric pressure is 3 times Earth normal, gravity is 1.7 times standard, and the weather patterns are extremely violent. The dragon's lair is located deep within the planetary core, accessible only through ancient tunnel systems. The transport shuddered as they passed through particularly turbulent clouds. When they finally broke through to the lower atmosphere, Hana saw a landscape that looked like it belonged in a nightmare. Black mountains rose like broken teeth from plains of red sand. Rivers of what appeared to be molten metal carved glowing channels across the terrain. The sky was a sickly yellow color, lit by constant lightning flashes. They landed on a platform carved into the side of the largest mountain. The structure looked impossibly old, built from blocks of black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols were carved into every surface, symbols that made Hana's eyes water when she tried to focus on them. "This is where your journey on foot begins," Caretaker 7 announced as the transport's exit ramp lowered. "I am not permitted to accompany you beyond this point." Hana stood at the threshold, feeling the weight of an alien world's gravity pulling at her. The air that rushed in through the open door smelled of metal and ozone, with an underlying scent she could not identify, but which made her think of very old, very deep places. "What happens if I succeed?" she asked the robot. Success would indicate that humanity possesses qualities valued by the cosmic dragon. However, given the historical precedent, success scenarios have not been extensively planned for. "And if I fail?" "Failure typically results in immediate death, followed by your species being permanently barred from council consideration." Hana nodded, accepting the stark reality of her situation. 7 billion humans were counting on her to somehow accomplish what no other species had managed in 800 years. The weight of that responsibility should have crushed her, but instead it made her feel strangely calm. She had always been good in emergency situations. When her school had caught fire 2 years ago, she had been the one to help organize the evacuation while other students panicked. When her grandfather had his heart attack, she had called for help and performed CPR until the paramedics arrived. In moments of crisis, something inside her always seemed to know what needed to be done. "I will see you on the other side," she told Caretaker 7, though they both knew that was probably not true. The robot's optical sensors focused on her one last time. "For what it is worth, Hana Kim, your species has already demonstrated remarkable courage by sending you here. That should count for something even if the trial goes poorly." "Thank you," she said, surprised by how much the robot's words meant to her. Hana stepped off the transport and onto the ancient stone platform. The gravity was heavier than Earth's, making each step feel like she was wearing invisible weights. The air was thin and tasted of copper, but it was breathable. Behind her, the transport sealed its doors and lifted off, disappearing into the storm clouds above. She was now completely alone on an alien world, with nothing but her wits and whatever qualities made humans special to protect her from a dragon that had killed every challenger for centuries. The entrance to the mount. The darkness inside the mountain was complete. Hana had never experienced anything like it before. Even on the darkest nights on Earth, there was always some light from stars or distant cities. Here she could not see her own hand when she held it in front of her face. Yet somehow she could walk without stumbling. Her feet found smooth stone paths that seemed to glow faintly when she stepped on them. just enough to show her where to place her next step. The walls around her pulsed with a soft rhythm that matched her heartbeat, as if the mountain itself was alive and aware of her presence. The silence was as profound as the darkness. When she tried calling out to hear an echo, no sound came back. Her footsteps made no noise despite her sneakers touching stone. Even her breathing seemed muffled, as though the air itself absorbed all sound before it could travel more than a few inches. Hana had been walking for what felt like hours. Though without any way to measure time, she could not be sure. The tunnel sloped steadily downward, leading her deeper into the heart of the planet. Sometimes the passage was narrow enough that she could touch both walls at once. Other times it opened into vast spaces that her glowing footsteps could not illuminate. The first wonder she encountered was a chamber filled with what looked like glass trees. Their transparent branches reached toward an invisible ceiling, and fruit made of liquid light hung from their limbs. The fruit glowed with soft colors that reminded her of sunsets and rainbows, radiating warmth that made her homesick for reasons she could not explain. She wanted to touch one of the glowing fruits, but something warned her not to. This place was testing her somehow, and she sensed that taking something that did not belong to her would be the wrong choice. Instead, she stood quietly in the center of the glass forest and simply appreciated its impossible beauty. The next chamber contained a pool of water so still it looked like polished metal. When Hana knelt beside it and looked down, she saw not her own reflection but something much stranger. Faces appeared in the water, changing and blending in an endless flow. She saw her parents, her brother Daehyun, her teachers from school, neighbors from her street, and people she had never met before. As she watched, she realized she was seeing every human who had ever lived. Ancient faces from times before written history, mixed with modern faces from every country on Earth. The water was showing her the entire story of humanity, all the people who had lived and died and contributed something to the species that had produced her. She saw farmers who had learned to grow food, inventors who had created tools, artists who had painted beautiful pictures, and ordinary people who had simply loved their families and tried to be kind to others. Every face in the water had been important in some way. Even if history had forgotten their names, the sight filled her with a strange sense of responsibility. She was not just representing herself or even the humans alive today. She was representing every human who had ever existed, all their hopes and dreams and struggles condensed into this one moment. In the third chamber, she found something that took her breath away completely. The walls were covered in what appeared to be living paintings that moved and changed as she watched. They showed scenes from Earth's history, but not the big events that appeared in textbooks. Instead, they showed small moments of kindness and connection. She saw a medieval peasant sharing his last piece of bread with a stranger. She saw soldiers from opposing armies helping each other during a temporary truce. She saw a child comforting another child who was crying, even though they spoke different languages. She saw thousands of tiny acts of compassion that no one had ever recorded, but which had somehow been preserved in this alien place. Each painting seemed to glow brighter when she looked at it, as if her attention was feeding it somehow. She realized that these images were not just showing her human history. They were showing her what the dragon considered important about humans. Not their wars or their technology or their great leaders, but their capacity for unexpected kindness. As she continued deeper into the mountain, the chambers became more frequent and more wonderful. She walked through a garden where flowers made of crystallized music chimed softly in harmonies that made her want to cry with happiness. She crossed a bridge over a river of flowing starlight that whispered secrets in languages she had never heard, but somehow understood. Each wonder felt like a question, though not one she could answer with words. The mountain was asking her something fundamental about what it meant to be human, and her responses were being measured in ways she could not comprehend. The tunnels began to change as she went deeper. The smooth corridors gave way to passages carved from living rock that seemed to breathe around her. The walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, but which conveyed meaning when she glimpsed them from the corner of her eye. They spoke of time and space and forces that operated on scales beyond human understanding. She passed through a chamber where gravity worked differently, allowing her to walk on the walls and ceiling as easily as the floor. In another room, she encountered what appeared to be a small sun floating in the center of the space, providing warmth but no harmful radiation. The light it cast revealed murals on the walls that showed the history of countless alien civilizations. each one rising and falling in cycles that spanned millions of years. The most disturbing chamber contained what looked like a museum of failures. Display cases held artifacts from species that had attempted the dragon's trial and been found wanting. She saw weapons that could destroy planets, artifacts that contained the accumulated knowledge of entire civilizations, and objects of beauty beyond description. All of them had belonged to beings who had been judged insufficient. Hana paused in front of one display that contained a simple stone carving of two figures holding hands. The plaque beneath it was written in symbols she could not read, but somehow she understood that it represented a species that had valued cooperation above all else. They had been destroyed not for being weak or stupid, but for being too trusting, too willing to believe that others would honor their peaceful intentions. The sight filled her with a deep sadness, but also with determination. If beings who valued peace and cooperation had failed the trial, then the dragon was looking for something more complex than simple kindness. She needed to understand what that something was before she faced Bayek directly. As she left the Museum of Failures behind, the character of the tunnels changed again. The passages became larger and more ornate, carved with flowing patterns that seemed to move when she was not looking directly at them. The air grew warmer and began to carry scents she could not identify, but which made her think of growing things in open spaces. She was getting close to something important. Every step now felt weighted with significance, as if the mountain was holding its breath in anticipation. The glowing footsteps that had guided her through the darkness began to pulse more rapidly, matching the increased beating of her heart. Ahead of her, the tunnel opened into a space so vast that her footsteps could not illuminate its boundaries. The darkness beyond the entrance was different from what she had experienced so far. This was not empty darkness, but darkness filled with presence, with intelligence, with something ancient and powerful waiting patiently for her arrival. Hana stood at the threshold of what she knew must be the dragon's main chamber. Everything she had experienced in the mountain had been preparation for this moment. The wonders she had seen, the questions she had been asked without words, the tests she had passed without knowing she was being tested, all of it had led to this place. She could feel the dragon's attention focusing on her like the weight of a star. Bayek was aware of her presence and was waiting to see what this small human would do when faced with a being of cosmic power and ancient wisdom. Hana took a deep breath, gathering courage from thoughts of everyone who was counting on her, her family, her friends, her teachers, all the humans throughout history who had faced impossible odds and chosen to try anyway. She was not alone, even in this place of profound solitude. She stepped forward into the dragon's domain. The chamber was beyond anything she could have imagined. It stretched away in all directions, its walls curving upward and outward until they disappeared in misty darkness. Pools of liquid light dotted the floor like stars reflected in still water. The air shimmered with colors that had no names in any human language. And in the center of it all, coiled around a pillar of crystallized time that stretched from floor to invisible ceiling, lay the cosmic dragon Bayek. Hana's journey through the mountain had ended. Her real test was about to begin. Bayek was even more magnificent than Hana had imagined. The cosmic dragon was enormous, her body coiled around the crystal pillar like a living mountain. Each of her scales was the size of a dinner plate and caught the chamber's ethereal light, creating patterns that seemed to shift between different dimensions. Her head alone was larger than most Earth vehicles, resting on forepaws that ended in claws capable of carving through solid rock. But it was the dragon's eyes that truly marked her as something beyond mortal understanding. They held the depth of space itself, filled with swirling galaxies and dying stars. When those ancient eyes focused on Hana, the girl felt as though every secret she had ever kept was being gently examined and catalogued. Hana approached slowly, showing no fear despite every instinct telling her to run. The dragon's presence was overwhelming, not because of any evil intent, but simply due to the sheer magnitude of consciousness she represented. This was a being who had watched civilizations rise and fall, who had seen the birth and death of galaxies, who carried the weight of cosmic truth in her ancient mind. "Another lamb comes to the slaughter," Bayek spoke without moving her massive jaws. The words formed directly in Hana's mind, carrying harmonics of sadness, wisdom, and terrible loneliness. "Tell me, little human, what makes your species believe they deserve to stand among the stars?" The dragon's voice was like music made of starlight, beautiful and alien and filled with the weight of centuries. Hana felt the urge to fall to her knees in worship, but she fought against it. Beck was testing her already, and showing weakness would not help humanity's cause. "I do not think we deserve anything," Hana replied honestly, stopping just outside what she estimated was the range of the dragon's breath. "Deserve implies that we have earned something through our actions. We are too young as a species to have earned much of anything on a galactic scale." The dragon's massive head tilted slightly, expressing surprise. In all her centuries of conducting trials, no candidate had ever begun by admitting their unworthiness. Warriors had boasted of their strength, scholars had cited their wisdom, leaders had proclaimed their achievements. None had ever started with humility. "Yet you accepted the trial," Beck observed, her mental voice carrying notes of curiosity. "Your council representatives spoke of humanity's unique qualities, of contributions your species could make to the galactic community." Was this mere arrogance? Maybe, Hana admitted, looking up at the cosmic being towering above her. But I think it was something else. Hope, maybe. The belief that we could become something better than what we are now. Beck's laughter was like the sound of solar winds singing through cosmic dust. It was not mocking laughter, but the kind that comes from recognizing something unexpectedly delightful. Hope. How many species have claimed that their hope made them special? How many have insisted that their potential was worth preserving? The dragon's voice grew heavy with accumulated sorrow as she continued. "I have heard such words from the greatest warriors, the wisest philosophers, the most advanced civilizations this galaxy has ever produced. All of them believed their hope was unique." Hana felt the weight of those failed trials in the dragon's words, centuries of beings who had come here convinced of their worth, only to be found lacking in ways they could not understand. The sadness in Beck's voice suggested that she took no pleasure in these judgments, that each failure was a loss that grieved her. "What made them fail?" Hana asked quietly. The question seemed to surprise the dragon. Previous candidates had focused on proving their own worth, not on understanding the failures of others. Beck uncoiled herself from the crystal pillar with movements that seemed to bend space around her. As she rose to her full height, Hana realized that the dragon existed partially outside normal reality, with parts of her form flickering between dimensions. "They failed because they were exceptional," Beck said, her words carrying a weight that made the air itself seem heavier. "Each species that has come before me possessed remarkable qualities that set them apart from all others. They were stronger or wiser or more advanced or more unified than any civilization the galaxy had seen. And that was their weakness? Their excellence made them incomplete," the dragon explained, beginning to pace around the chamber with movements that flowed like liquid starlight. "When you are the strongest, you stop learning how to rely on others. When you are the smartest, you stop listening to different perspectives. When you are the most advanced, you stop growing." Hana began to understand what the dragon was telling her. Every species that had failed the trial had been too perfect in some way, too specialized in their particular strength to be good partners in a diverse galactic community. "Tell me about your species, little human," Beck commanded, settling into a position that allowed her to study Hana more closely. "What makes humans different from the exceptional beings who have failed before you?" "We are not exceptional at all," Hana said simply. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy, or the smartest or the most technologically advanced. We are not even close to being the best at anything important." The dragon's cosmic eyes narrowed with interest. "Yet you suggest this is somehow an advantage?" "I think it might be," Hana replied, sitting down cross-legged on the chamber floor. The gesture was so unexpected that Bayek found herself lowering her massive head to get closer to the small human. When humans encounter something we do not understand, our first instinct is not to conquer it or judge it or try to prove we are better than it. "What is your first instinct?" Hana smiled, and the expression was so genuinely warm that it seemed to make the chamber's light grow brighter. "We try to become friends with it." Beck was silent for several long moments, processing this simple statement through cognitive frameworks that spanned geological eras. Friendship. Of all the qualities that species had claimed as their unique contribution to galactic civilization, none had ever simply offered friendship. "You would befriend a cosmic dragon who has devoured civilizations?" Bayek asked, though her tone suggested she was more curious than offended. "If you would let me," Hana replied without hesitation. "You seem lonely." The words hit Beck with unexpected force. In all her centuries of existence, through countless encounters with beings of every imaginable description, no one had ever simply observed that she was lonely. They had feared her, challenged her, attempted to bargain with her, but none had recognized the fundamental truth of her existence. She was indeed lonely, the last of her kind, keeper of trials that served a council she no longer fully believed in, judge of species she found increasingly predictable in their exceptional limitations. The cosmic dragon had become a myth, a legend, a force of nature. But beneath all of that, she was simply a being who had not had a genuine conversation in centuries. "How did you know?" Beck whispered, her mental voice softer than it had been since the trial began. "Because that is what humans do," Hannah explained gently. "We notice when someone is sad or alone, even if they are trying to hide it. We care about others even when it does not benefit us. We make emotional connections with beings that are completely different from us." The dragon found herself leaning closer to the small human, drawn by something she had almost forgotten existed. This child was not trying to impress her or overcome her or prove anything at all. She was simply being kind to someone who needed kindness. This could be manipulation, Beck said, though her voice lacked conviction, an attempt to survive the trial through deception rather than merit. Hannah shrugged, the gesture somehow both childlike and profoundly wise. "It could be. But think about it this way. If I was trying to manipulate you, would not I have prepared some elaborate strategy, researched your past victims and figured out what they did wrong? Instead, I am just sitting here talking to you like you are a person because that is what humans do. That sounds remarkably foolish." "Oh, it absolutely is," Hannah agreed cheerfully. "We make friends with our enemies, adopt creatures that should eat us, and try to help people who cannot help us back. It is completely irrational by any logical standard." Beck found herself genuinely smiling for the first time in decades. "Yet your species survived long enough to reach the stars. Barely. And only because when things got really bad, someone always stepped up to help someone else, even when it did not make sense." Hannah picked up a small crystal that had fallen from the cavern ceiling, turning it over in her hands and watching the light play through its faceted surface. "That is what I think the galaxy needs. Not another super powerful species that can solve problems through force or advanced technology. What does it need? Someone ordinary enough to ask for help when they need it, and weird enough to offer help when they do not have to." Hannah looked up at the cosmic dragon with eyes that held no fear, only compassion. Someone who sees a lonely dragon and thinks about being her friend instead of figuring out how to defeat her. For the first time in 800 years, the cosmic dragon found. Beck felt something shifting deep within her ancient consciousness. This trial was unlike any she had conducted before. The human child had not come to prove her species' superiority or to claim their place among the galactic elite. She had come simply to connect, to understand, to offer the kind of genuine companionship that Beck had not experienced in centuries. Beck studied the small human girl with new interest, her cosmic consciousness turning over thoughts and possibilities that had not occurred to her in centuries. This trial was proceeding in ways she had never experienced before, and for the first time in ages, she found herself genuinely uncertain about what would happen next. "You speak of cooperation and friendship as though they were strengths rather than weaknesses," the dragon said thoughtfully. "But surely your species has conflicts, internal divisions, struggles for power and resources like every other civilization." "Of course we do," Hannah acknowledged without hesitation. "Humans are terrible at getting along sometimes. We fight over resources, different beliefs, territory, sometimes just because we are having a bad day. But we are also really good at surprising each other." She thought of history lessons from school, stories that had always seemed incredible until this moment when they needed to be true. During our Second World War, enemy soldiers would sometimes declare unofficial truces on holidays and share food with each other. In natural disasters, people risk their lives to save strangers they have never met. When someone falls down in public, the first instinct of most humans is to help them up, even if we do not know them. Beck's massive head tilted as she processed these examples. "You are describing a species that acts against its own rational interests on a regular basis." "Exactly," Hannah said, grinning widely. "We are completely unreasonable, and somehow that makes us human." The dragon was quiet for a long moment, running these concepts through mental frameworks accumulated over millennia of existence. Every species she had judged before had approached the trial as a test to be passed, a challenge to be overcome through their particular strengths. This human child was treating it as an opportunity to have a conversation with someone who might become a friend. "Your species fascinates me," Beck admitted, her mental voice carrying notes of wonder that surprised even her. But fascination alone does not determine worthiness. The Galactic Council expects its members to contribute meaningfully to interstellar civilization. What can humanity offer that justifies inclusion among species far more advanced in every measurable category? Hana set down the crystal she had been examining and looked up at the cosmic dragon with thoughtful eyes. "Can I ask you something first? How long have you been conducting these trials?" "Approximately 800 of your years," Beck replied, curious about this new direction in their conversation. "And in all that time, how many species have you approved for council membership?" The dragon was silent for several moments, though the pause was answer enough. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight of accumulated disappointment. "None. None," Hana repeated softly. 800 years and you have not found a single species worthy of joining the council. Do you not think that might be a problem with the test rather than with the candidates?" Beck's form shimmered as the implications of the question rippled through her consciousness. The child was challenging not just her judgment, but the fundamental premise of the trial itself. It was a level of audacity that should have triggered her deepest defenses, yet somehow it felt more like an invitation to examine assumptions she had never questioned. "The trial reveals truth," the dragon said, though her voice carried less certainty than before. "Those who have failed lack the essential qualities necessary for meaningful cooperation with other species. Or maybe," Hana suggested gently, "the trial has been looking for the wrong qualities all along." She stood up and began walking slowly around the base of the crystal pillar, her small form dwarfed by its impossible geometry. As she moved, she continued speaking, her voice taking on the rhythm of someone working through a complex problem out loud. "Every species that has taken this trial has been judged by their individual merits, right? Their strength, their wisdom, their technological advancement, their special abilities. But civilization is not built by individuals, no matter how exceptional they are. It is built by groups working together." Beck found herself following the girl's movement with her massive head, fascinated despite herself by this unprecedented approach to the trial. "Explain further." "Think about the greatest achievements in galactic history," Hana continued, her pace steady as she circled the pillar. "The transcendence gates that connect distant star systems, the universal translator network that allows thousands of species to communicate, the treaty of solar winds that ended the Great Wars. Were any of those created by a single species working alone?" The dragon's ancient memory reviewed the history the child described. Indeed, every major galactic achievement had required cooperation between multiple species, each contributing their unique capabilities to create something greater than any could have accomplished individually. Collaboration was necessary, Beck acknowledged. But exceptional species were still required to initiate and lead such projects. Were they? Hana stopped walking and turned to face the dragon directly. Or were they just the ones who got the most credit in the history books? Because I bet if you really looked at those projects, you would find that the crucial breakthroughs came from ordinary beings, working on ordinary problems in extraordinary ways. The cosmic dragon extended her consciousness, reaching into the quantum layers of reality, where information existed in its purest form. She examined the historical records not as they were commonly told, but as they had actually occurred moment by moment. Decision by decision, what she found shook her to her crystalline core. The transcendence gates had indeed been designed by the brilliant Corvani scientists, but the breakthrough that made them stable had come from a junior maintenance worker who noticed an unusual energy pattern in the prototype. The universal translator had not been created by the genius linguists of the telepathic consortium, but by a team of cultural researchers who insisted that true translation required understanding context, not just words. In every case, the exceptional beings had provided the framework, but ordinary individuals had supplied the insights that made the impossible possible. "How did you know?" Beck whispered, her mental voice filled with awe. Hana smiled sadly. "Because that is how everything works back on Earth too. The famous scientists get remembered for the big discoveries, but usually it is some student or lab worker who notices the weird result that changes everything. The brilliant generals get credit for winning wars, but the actual fighting is done by ordinary soldiers who just want to go home to their families. She sat down again, this time directly in front of the dragon's massive head. That is what humans are good at. We are not the ones who come up with the grand plans or lead the great civilizations. We are the ones who notice that something is not quite right, or think to try a completely different approach, or just refuse to give up when everyone else says it is impossible. Beck lowered her great head until she was nearly at eye level with the child, her cosmic gaze intense with newfound understanding. You are proposing that humanity's value lies not in what you can achieve but in how you think, and how we connect with others, Hana added. We are really good at making friends with things that should probably eat us. It has gotten us in trouble sometimes, but it is also how we learned to work with wolves and horses and a dozen other species that made our civilization possible. The dragon's laughter was like the sound of new stars being born. You would attempt to befriend the galaxy itself. Not befriend exactly, more like help everyone remember why they wanted to work together in the first place. The girl's expression grew more serious. The Council has spent centuries trying to find species exceptional enough to join them, but maybe what they really need is someone ordinary enough to help them remember what cooperation actually means. Beck was quiet for a long time, processing not just the words but the fundamental shift in perspective they represented. This child had not come to prove humanity's worthiness according to established criteria. Instead, she had questioned the criteria themselves and proposed an entirely different approach to evaluating galactic citizenship. Tell me, Hana Kim, Beck said, speaking the girl's name for the first time. If I were to approve humanity for council membership, what would your species do with that opportunity? The child considered the question carefully before answering. Probably make a lot of mistakes at first. We would ask too many questions, suggest things that seem obvious to everyone else, and generally be a nuisance until we figured out how things work. That hardly sounds appealing. No, but it might be useful. Sometimes when you have been doing things the same way for a long time, you need someone who does not know how things are supposed to work to point out that maybe there is a better way. Hana grinned, and after we got past the initial awkwardness, I think we would probably end up being the species that remembers everyone's birthdays and make sure no one gets left out of important decisions. The cosmic dragon found herself laughing again, a sound that had not echoed through her domain for more years than she cared to count. This strange little human had somehow transformed what should have been a traditional trial into something closer to a therapy session, and in doing so had revealed truths about the galactic community that no previous candidate had even glimpsed. But there was still one more test to conduct. Reality fractured around Hana like glass struck by a cosmic hammer. The crystal cavern dissolved into swirling chaos, replaced by visions that assaulted her mind with their terrible clarity. She found herself experiencing not just images, but the full emotional and sensory reality of what Beck was showing her. She saw Earth as it would be 100 years after joining the Galactic Council. Her home planet had become a tourist destination for alien species, its unique environment preserved under protective domes, while the original inhabitants lived in carefully managed areas. Humans worked mainly as entertainers and curiosities, their emotions and customs providing amusement for more advanced beings. The vision shifted, and she witnessed the slow disappearance of human identity as contact with superior technologies and ideas revealed the basic limitations of her species. Human art became copies of alien forms. Human science became useless compared to council knowledge, and human values became increasingly meaningless in a galaxy operated by beings with abilities beyond imagination. She experienced the mental destruction of her own family. Her parents, once proud teachers, were reduced to tour guides explaining human child-raising practices to beings who reproduced through energy transfer. Her brother Daehyun, brilliant and curious, slowly lost hope as he realized that his species would never again make meaningful discoveries or contributions to galactic knowledge. The visions continued, each one more crushing than the last. She saw humanity's greatest minds driven to despair by the recognition of their cosmic unimportance. She witnessed the gradual decline of human population as birth rates fell due to widespread depression and meaninglessness. She experienced the final moment when the last human died alone, surrounded by alien caretakers who preserved recordings of their extinct culture in vast digital museums. But the cruelest vision was saved for last. Bake showed her the truth behind the Galactic Council itself. The Great Alliance was not a cooperative venture between equals. but a carefully managed system designed to extract useful qualities from member species, while gradually absorbing them into a uniform galactic culture. The Council's true purpose was not diversity but absorption, not cooperation but consumption. Every species that had ever joined the Council had eventually lost their identity, becoming faceless components in a vast machine of galactic administration. The promise of membership was actually a sentence of cultural extinction, carried out so gradually and pleasantly that most species never realized what they had lost until it was too late. As the visions ended, and reality returned, Hannah found herself on her knees in the crystal cavern, tears streaming down her face. The knowledge of what awaited her species if she succeeded in the trial was a weight that threatened to crush her spirit entirely. This was Bayek's final test, the concentrated despair that had broken every previous candidate. The cosmic dragon loomed above her, massive and unchanging. Now you know the truth, young human. The trial was never about proving your species worthy of joining the Council. It was about determining whether you possess the wisdom to reject membership when you understand its true cost. Hannah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, struggling to process the devastating revelations. Everything she had believed about the opportunity humanity was being offered had been a lie. The chance to join the galactic community was actually a trap disguised as a gift. So this is why no species has passed the trial in 800 years, she said, her voice hollow with shock. Because anyone who truly understands what Council membership means would be insane to accept it. Indeed, Beck confirmed sadly. I have watched 17 species make the same mistake, drawn by the promise of advancement and acceptance into galactic society. Each time I hoped that one would possess the wisdom to reject the Council's offer. Each time I was disappointed. The dragon's ancient eyes reflected infinite sorrow as she continued. The truly exceptional species, the ones who might have contributed something meaningful to galactic civilization, are the ones who see through the deception. But they never get the chance because they refuse to take the trial at all. Hannah slowly got to her feet, her young mind racing as she processed the implications of what she had learned. The weight of her species' future pressed down on her with crushing force, but beneath the despair, something else was beginning to emerge. You are lonely, she said suddenly, looking up at the cosmic dragon with new understanding. Not just because you are the last of your kind. You are lonely because you have been forced to destroy the hope of every species that might have been worthy of friendship. Bake's massive form shuddered as the truth hit home. I am the guardian of a trial designed to preserve the Council's power by eliminating potential threats to their control. Every being I have judged and found wanting was actually too valuable to be allowed into their system. Including humans, Hannah said quietly. Especially humans. The dragon agreed. Your species' capacity for irrational cooperation, for forming connections across impossible differences, for acting against your own interests in service of others. These qualities represent everything the Council fears most. You would be a virus in their system, spreading dangerous ideas about equality and genuine collaboration. The girl nodded slowly, finally understanding the full scope of the trap that had been laid for humanity. But instead of despair, she felt a strange sense of relief beginning to grow within her. The choice she faced was terrible, but at least now it was honest. So what happens now? She asked. Do I fail the trial by rejecting Council membership? Do I return to Earth and tell them we have been deemed unworthy? Beck's expression grew thoughtful as she considered the question. That would be the traditional outcome. You would join the ranks of species who have learned the truth but lack the power to act upon it. But, Hannah said, sensing there was more to the dragon's thoughts. But you are not like the previous candidates, Beck admitted. You approached this trial differently, questioned assumptions that others accepted without thought, and demonstrated the very qualities that make your species unique. Perhaps it is time for a different kind of trial altogether. The cosmic dragon's form began to shift and change, her massive size condensing as she drew her essence into a more compact configuration. When the transformation was complete, she stood before Hannah in a form that, while still clearly draconic, was closer to human scale. What would you say? Hannah Kim, Beck asked with a smile that revealed teeth like crystallized starlight. To the possibility of bypassing the Council entirely? Hannah stared at the transformed dragon, her mind struggling to keep pace with the rapid shift in everything she thought she understood about her situation. Bypass the Council? How would that even be possible? Beck's smile widened, revealing an expression of excitement that transformed her ancient features. You have shown me something I had forgotten existed, young human. You reminded me that cooperation does not require hierarchy, that meaningful relationships can form between beings of vastly different capabilities without one dominating the other. The dragon began pacing around the crystal pillar, her movements now quick and energetic rather than the slow majesty she had displayed in her massive form. For 800 years I have been trapped in this role, judging species by criteria designed to maintain the Council's power structure. But your approach to the trial has revealed a fundamental truth that I had lost sight of. What truth? That the galaxy does not need another hierarchical organization controlling access to civilization, Beck declared, her voice ringing with newfound purpose. What it needs is a network of genuine cooperation between species who choose to work together as equals, not subjects and rulers. The implications of the dragon's words sent a thrill of possibility through Hana's chest. You are talking about starting something completely new. Indeed, an alliance based on the principles your species naturally embodies. Voluntary cooperation, mutual aid, friendship across difference, and the recognition that every participant has value, regardless of their technological advancement or special abilities. Beck stopped pacing and turned to face the girl directly. I have spent centuries accumulating knowledge about species throughout the galaxy. I know which ones have been rejected by the Council for being too cooperative, too equal, too willing to share power. I know which civilizations have been pushed aside for refusing to accept hierarchical relationships with more advanced species. The dragon's eyes blazed with cosmic fire as she continued. What if we could bring them together? What if humanity could serve as the catalyst for a new kind of galactic community? One built on the kind of unreasonable friendship you described. Hana felt her heart racing as the scope of what Bayek was proposing became clear. Instead of joining an existing power structure, humanity could help create an entirely new approach to interstellar civilization. It was ambitious beyond anything she had imagined possible, and utterly terrifying in its potential consequences. That sounds amazing, she said carefully, but also incredibly dangerous. The Council is not going to just let us build a competing organization without trying to stop us. No, they will not, Beck agreed grimly. They have spent millennia carefully controlling the development of galactic civilization to maintain their dominance. An alliance based on equality and cooperation would threaten me, and Hana found herself thinking of all the history lessons she had learned in school. Stories of ordinary people who had chosen to stand up against overwhelming odds because they believed something better was possible. The American colonists facing the British Empire, the French resistance against the Nazis, the civil rights workers challenging centuries of systematic oppression. None of those movements had begun with military advantages or superior technology. They had started with people who refused to accept that the current system was the only option, who were willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to create something better. If we did this, she said slowly, it would not just be humanity at risk. Every species that joined us would be putting themselves in danger. Yes, Beck acknowledged. But consider the alternative. The Council system ensures that eventually, every species either submits to absorption or faces extinction. At least this way they would have the chance to fight for something worth preserving. The dragon paused, allowing the weight of the decision to settle between them. I will not ask you to make this choice lightly, Hana Kim. What I am proposing would change the course of galactic history. Your species would go from being unknown newcomers to targets of the most powerful organization in the galaxy. But we would also have allies, Hana pointed out. All those species the Council has rejected or pushed aside. And we would have you. Beck's expression grew serious. My support would be valuable, but it would also make me a target. The Council has left me alone for centuries because I served their purposes, eliminating potential threats through the trial system. If I openly opposed them, they would move against me with everything they have. The cosmic dragon's honesty about the risks only reinforced Hana's growing certainty about what needed to be done. This was exactly the kind of unreasonable, potentially suicidal decision that defined humanity at its best. The choice to help someone even when it put you in danger, to fight for something better even when the odds were impossible. There is something I need to tell you, Hana said. Her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. I did not come here just representing myself or even just representing humanity. Bake tilted her head, curiosity evident in her cosmic features. Before I left Earth, I had conversations with representatives from every major nation, every significant cultural group, every important organization my planet has. We all agreed that this decision was too important to be made by one person, even if I was the one taking the trial. Hana reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like nothing more than a simple metal pendant. This is a quantum communicator. It has been recording everything that has happened here and transmitting it back to Earth in real time. Right now, 7 billion humans are watching this conversation and participating in the decision. The dragon's eyes widened with surprise and something approaching awe. Your entire species is here with you. Not physically, but in every way that matters. The girl's smile was radiant with pride in her people. So when I tell you that humanity chooses to help you build something better than the Council system, I am not speaking just for myself. I am speaking for all of us. The quantum communicator in her hand pulsed with soft light as confirmation signals arrived from Earth. Across the planet, in cities and villages, government buildings and family homes, 7 billion humans had just voted to risk everything for the chance to build a better galaxy. Beck stared at the small device for a long moment, processing the implications of what Hana had revealed. You brought your entire species into my domain. You made them all participants in the trial. Because that is what humans do, Hana said simply. When something important is happening, we all want to be part of it. Even if it is dangerous, even if we might lose everything, we would rather face it together than leave someone to handle it alone. The cosmic dragon threw back her head and laughed, a sound of pure joy that made the crystal formations throughout the cavern ring like bells. Magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. You have just demonstrated the exact quality that makes your species indispensable to the galaxy's future. Beck's form began to glow with renewed energy as she made her own decision. Very well, Hana Kim, speaking for all humanity. I accept your alliance. Together we will build something the galaxy has never seen before, a confederation of equals, united not by hierarchy but by friendship. The dragon extended one scaled hand toward the girl, who reached up to clasp it without hesitation. The moment their hands touched, light exploded through the cavern as cosmic forces aligned around their pact. Let the council tremble, Beck declared, her voice carrying across dimensional barriers to echo throughout the galaxy. The age of enforced hierarchy is ending. The age of chosen cooperation has begun. As the light faded, both human and dragon knew that the easy part was over. Now came the real challenge of convincing the galaxy that there was a better way to live among the stars. But they would not face that challenge alone. Somewhere in the cosmic distance, other species who had dreamed of freedom were already sensing the change. The revolution had begun not with weapons or threats, but with a 13-year-old girl offering friendship to a lonely dragon. Across the galaxy in the Council's seat of power, alarms began to sound as sensors detected an impossible energy signature from the trial world. Something had gone wrong with their carefully controlled system. Something wonderfully, terrifyingly wrong. The dragon and the human girl stood together in the crystal chamber, looking up at the stars visible through the mountain's peak. They could see the lights of distant worlds, each one home to beings who had never been given the choice to live freely among equals. Where do we start? Hana asked, her voice filled with excitement and determination. Bake smiled, her cosmic eyes reflecting the light of a billion stars. We start by going home, little friend. Your people are waiting to hear what you have learned, and mine are waiting to be awakened from a very long sleep. Your people? I thought you were the last cosmic dragon. I am the last awake cosmic dragon, Beck corrected gently. The others sleep in hidden places throughout the galaxy, waiting for a reason to return. You have given us that reason. As they prepared to leave the ancient chamber, Hana felt a surge of hope unlike anything she had ever experienced. Humanity was about to embark on the greatest adventure in their species' history, and they would not be walking that path alone. The stars were calling, and for the first time in centuries, someone was ready to answer with friendship instead of conquest. The galaxy would never be the same. Behind them, the crystal pillar began to pulse with new energy, sending signals to sleeping dragons and forgotten allies across the vast reaches of space. The age of the Council was ending. The age of true cooperation was about to begin. And it had all started with a 13-year-old girl who believed that being ordinary was the most extraordinary thing of all.